I'ma keep winning, winning. I'ma keep winning, winning. Ooh. I'ma keep winning, winning. You can try to save yourself, but you only go.
What's going on, guys? Jay Cam back with another video, and today I'm going to be bringing you my post-free agency mock draft. A lot of the stuff has changed. A lot of teams have went out and filled a lot of different needs, so there's going to be a lot of different draft picks that's going to be going on based on before free agency and to now. So before we get into it, please make sure to like the video, comment down below anything you agree or disagree with I talk about here, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for future NFL content, whether it's going to be pro days coming up or building up all the way to the NFL draft. So make sure to subscribe to keep up with all the channel and the videos I'm going to be putting out. So jumping into this post free agency, there's been a lot of different teams that have signed a couple different players, filled a couple needs. So we're definitely getting a more in-depth look at where teams are going to be going. And starting out with the Tennessee Titans, a lot of the stuff that they've done in free agency before, the question was, are they going to go Abdul Carter Hunter or a quarterback? Based on what they've done for agency, it looks like that they're setting up to draft a quarterback. They've went out and they signed a couple offensive line pieces, whether they were overpaid or not. They've kind of signed a couple defensive pieces, and it looks like that they're trying to set up the next quarterback that they're going to be bringing in. And in my opinion, I think that's going to stick with Cam Ward where it's been before. A lot of people, the Titans are at number one. You might as well take the swing on a quarterback while you're there, because who knows if you're ever going to be at the number one spot again, and if you're going to be in the right position to be able to take a quarterback. So if you have a chance, you don't pass on them. Kind of what happened in the Patrick Mahomes draft. A lot of teams didn't want to take a quarterback that year, so they ended up passing on quarterback, and Patrick Mahomes ends up getting taken. So here, you might as well take the swing on it on a future NFL quarterback while you have the chance. Moving on to the second pick, the Cleveland Browns. Here, there's still a lot of stuff. Are they going to take best player? They haven't brought in another quarterback yet. They traded for Kenny Pickett. I think if they bring in another quarterback, that's going to be very telling on what they're going to do. If they bring in a Russell Wilson, I think that's going to tell that maybe they go Abdul Carter, which they still can here, even after they sign Myles Garrett. I think that they could still look at Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter and be able to combine Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett together. But I think at this point, they still haven't brought in a quarterback yet, so I think that they're going to go with Shador Sanders. A lot of the rumors still was that they're going to be taking a quarterback with their first pick in the draft, no matter what. So them at two, they're pretty much set up to get whichever one the Titans don't take. They could end up getting Cam Ward or Shador Sanders, depending on what happens. As of right now, at this point, about a month out from the NFL draft, I think I'm gonna have them taking Shador Sanders just because they haven't brought in another quarterback. If they bring in Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or somebody, that's definitely going to change the aspect and how we look at this. Number three, the Giants, they're really hoping that they get one of the quarterbacks. They're on the hot seat, Brian Dable and Joe Shane. Obviously, I don't think that they're going to be back next year, but they're going to try to make an immediate impact. And with both quarterbacks off the board, they're just going to take best player available. I think the best player for them would be to get Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter could play wide receiver and corner for him and help them kind of solve two spots and kind of have them filled out. I think Brian Dable would be able to use them in unique ways in his offense. They definitely do need corner, and they need another weapon to go alongside with Malik Neighbors, whoever their quarterback's going to be. There's still rumors that they're talking to Aaron Rodgers, whether Rodgers is trying to wait for the Vikings to decide if they want him or not. And then he's going to decide between the Browns and the Giants and the Steelers, those three options. So they could still bring in Aaron Rodgers to try to save Brian Dable's job. And if both quarterbacks are off the board, I think that they're just going to try to get who they think can help them win the most games. I think Travis Hunter solving two slots for him and being able to go both ways, even though I think he's going to play wide receiver in the NFL. I think that would be a good spot for him to be able for that Giants team to try to save their jobs and the head coaching job and then the front office. Moving on to number four, this is pretty much who the Patriots want. They're hoping that Abdul Carter falls into their lap. So if Abdul Carter's still there on the board, then they're pretty much going to take him. They brought in some defensive pieces still, and they brought in Morgan Moses on the offensive line at right tackle. They really haven't brought in many weapons, so that could be another option here. I think that they're going to wait. If Abdul Carter's still on the board, they're going to take Abdul Carter. If he ends up getting taken before them, then I think that they end up trying to trade back and try to draft a Ted McMillan for Drake May or one of the left tackles. I think could still be in play here, but With Abdul Carter on the board, I think they're going to take him. They ended up going out and they signed Milton Williams to be able to pair up with Christian Barmore. They went out and signed Harold Landry, who's more familiar, Mike Vrabel as their new head coach. And I think pairing them up with Abdul Carter, you get a very good defensive line that's able to come in and impact. And based on the injuries that we heard from the combine and all that stuff, Abdul Carter may have to go through a little bit, but I think he's going to be fine. So I think the Patriots, it's not really going to affect his draft stock, and they're going to see him as a pick here to be able to step in on that defensive line and make an immediate impact for him. The Jacksonville Jaguars, there was a couple different places. They ended up cutting a lot of their roster. Evan Ingram was a part of that, so there's a lot of rumors. Maybe they could be looking at more of a Tyler Warren here at 5. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case, but overall, I do think that they set it up to end up taking Mason Graham. Mason Graham's one of the most talented people in this draft. Yeah, I think he's seen as one of the top 3 or 4 best players in this draft overall, regardless of position. And they had one of the worst interior defensive lines last year. They really do need to help and bring in a run stuffer for one of the worst run defenses in the league. They still have Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker on the edges, so that could also bring in a little bit of help if you're more worried about Mason Graham on the interior. There's a little bit concerns about him being undersized. He didn't come in as big at the combine. He was a little bit lighter and he was a little bit shorter. But if you look at the tape, he still has immediate impact on whatever team he goes to, and he's able to pretty much bounce off any defenders, be able to get after the quarterback in pass rushing situations, and be able to be a great run defender to be able to shore up that terrible run defense that they have in Jacksonville. The Raiders, the Raiders are an interesting one because they brought in Geno Smith, they brought in an older Pete Carroll, and it seemed like that they were wanting to go more win now and try to make an immediate impact. But they also didn't go out and sign much in free agency. They were one of the worst rosters talent-wise in the NFL before free agency, and in free agency they didn't really sign anybody, so they're still kind of that area. So I could easily see Pete Carroll like he did in Seattle. He falls in love with these certain defensive style guys that could be similar to somebody like a Jalen Walker or a Michael Williams, like he did with the Jordan Brooks in Seattle, and ended up taking them in the first round because Seattle would always kind of have a little bit of wild picks because Pete Carroll would fall in love with that type of defender and the athleticism. But as of right now, a month out, before we hear a little bit more about that, I could see them falling in love with somebody like a Jalen Walker and then taking them here. But as of right now, I'm gonna have him taking Ashton Jeanty. Jeanty's one of the best players in this draft. He's a very skillful running back. My only argument for this is how big of an impact does he actually make for this Raiders team if they pick him? Because their roster is so bad and they don't have much talent. How much of an impact will Ashton Jeanty have with not a great surrounding cast? But I think that they see that. And like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if Pete Carroll took a certain defensive player that he falls in love with here. But I think Jeanty is definitely the best fit right now and would be the best for the Raiders to be able to pick. But the argument is with them being not such a great roster, how much of an impact would he actually have being drafted there? Number 7, the Jets. The Jets definitely made some moves. They were kind of quiet. They went out and signed Justin Fields, so they got their quarterback. I don't necessarily think that they're going to take a quarterback here. I think they're going to wait till next year, depending on how Justin Fields does. I think that they're going to set him up. Tedero McMillan could be in play here. He just had his pro day today. He ran out like a 4.48 at 6'5". But as of right now, I think I'm going to have them taking Armand Membu, offensive tackle from Missouri. The Jets still need a right tackle. They just lost Morgan Moses in free agency. They have 4 guys that they feel comfortable with that are very young, above average offensive line group after they've had a terrible offensive line for many years. So all they really need is that right tackle spot to be able to kind of solidify it. And Armand Membu played right tackle all of his time at Missouri. You wouldn't have to move him over. He can be a plug and play type guy. He has a very quick first step. He's a great outside zone scheme blocker. He gets a lot of movement. He's a very powerful guy in the running game. I've done a breakdown on all these offensive linemen on my channel on a playlist. If you haven't seen those, please go and watch those. I go more in depth with each one of the offensive linemen with my offensive line background. But Armand Membu, I think, would be a great fit in there with the Jets. Aaron Glenn from Detroit, that's kind of how they were dominant on the offensive side. They ran the ball and they had a dominant offensive line. They took Penei Sewell actually a couple of years ago at the number 7 overall pick. So it could be a little bit of similarities, although Armand Membu's not as good as Penei Sewell. But it would still be a similar situation going in there. The Carolina Panthers, I could see them easily taking wide receiver here with Tedder McMillan on the board, but I think with them bringing back Adam Thielen for another year and having Xavier Leggett, I think that they're going to wait a year. Their big issue was their defense. They ended up bringing in a couple of pieces. They brought Trayvon Morg in the back half and the secondary for the safety position. So I think that they're going to be looking for that edge presence in this draft. And it could either be Mike Green, it could be Shamar Stewart. And I think at this point, I might have them taking Mykel Williams here as the edge player that the Panthers are going to like if I can end up finding him. But I think Mykel Williams, he's a freak. He's kind of reminds me of Trayvon Walker from a couple of years ago. He's definitely going to rise up some boards here. He kind of already has. It's a team, if they see the high upside, he's very raw talent. But if you see the tools that he has and you can develop him in the right situation, kind of like Trayvon Walker, he's going to be very similar and be a great edge player on a team that's going to really see the talent and fall in love with his measurables. The measurables are key here. A team is going to see that and really see that. And just like the Jaguars did with Trent Baalke a couple years ago, even though he's not the GM anymore, they're going to see it and want to develop it and make him into a dominant edge player. And the Panthers defense was one of the worst in the NFL. They didn't have many talent and they brought in secondary talent in free agency. So I think Mykel Williams is really going to plug in there and be the edge rusher that they really need and be able to help them out on that defense side to get Bryce Young some stops that they couldn't get later in the year. New Orleans Saints, I think that they need to move on from Trevor Penning. I think they brought back Jawan Jennings, so they don't really need tight end anymore. Tyler Warren was kind of a spot where I kind of like to be able to take him here. But at this point, I'm gonna have him taking Will Campbell. Will Campbell could go and play guard. A lot of teams like. I'm not a big fan of Will Campbell based on my breakdown on film that I had from him about a month ago. But a lot of NFL teams, the report is that they love Will Campbell and he's a lot higher on NFL teams boards than on most media members. And he could play guard for a year. I don't necessarily think that he could play guard. He plays too high of a pad level and he's not really a dominant run blocker. He's definitely more of a tackle. I think with Trevor Penning not playing as good, kind of being more of like a bust for the Saints, they definitely need to bring in Will Campbell. It could be defensive line pick here, but I might have him taking Will Campbell to be able to set up whoever the next quarterback is going to be after Derek Carr. They just need to get younger and cheaper because they've been in such salary cap situation and salary cap hell. They really just need to be able to hit these picks that they have so that they can get more better players on a rookie deal on an aging, expensive roster. The Chicago Bears has had probably the best free agency out of anybody and the best offseason. They went out and revamped their offensive line. A lot of people thought offensive line might be the pick here, but they went and they signed Drew Dahlman. They traded for Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. So they pretty much just set up their entire five pieces of their offensive line. Ben Johnson, I think what they really want is Ashton Jeanty here, but in this situation, he's off the board. I think that they want to set up their running game and be able to get their Jahmyr Gibbs type player. But in this situation, he's not there. I think that them with a lot of two tight end sets like Ben Johnson ran in Detroit, being able to take Tyler Warren here would be huge for him. They could have Tyler Warren and Cole Kmet on the field at the same time and a lot of 12 personnel. And they could easily address running back in the second round with a lot of this depth of this running back class. They could be able to take a Judkins or a Travion Henderson potentially being able to move up into the second round. So I think that they could wait on that and get themselves a dominant tight end that could play pretty much anywhere. He could play in the wildcat. He could play in the slot. He could play with his hand down on the ground and block. He's one of the better blockers in this class and he's more that George Kittle type vibe. And he's kind of similar to Cole Kmet as well. So I think them being one of the better tight end duos if they end up getting selected here in Ben Johnson's scheme. The 49ers did have a very rough free agency. I ended up grading their free agency, and they were one of the losers, in my opinion. They had to let a lot of guys go. They let go of Debo. They ended up losing Dre Greenlaw. They ended up losing Fuaga and a couple other pieces. So I think that they're really going to be looking to attack that defense. I could see him taking trenches, but at this point, Will Johnson kind of falls into their lap. So I think Robert Saleh being the defensive coordinator, he's going to want his Sauce Gardner type corner, and they're going to end up taking Will Johnson. I know he kind of has injury concerns. He's had several injuries throughout his career, and his speed is kind of the question, but I think Will Johnson is definitely going to be a good pick for him to be able to come in and kind of help out that defense that got really depleted by free agency. That really just needs a couple pieces. They need another safety that they could attack in the second round. They definitely do need corner with Tre'Davious Ward going to the Colts. So they need to be able to replace those guys. And how you do that in the draft with some of these picks where they just fall into your lap and you just take the best player available. Number 12, the Cowboys. A lot of people think that they could go running back here. They brought in Javonte Williams, but I do think in this draft with the running back depth being so good, I think that they wait until the second or third round, kind of like the Bears, to take maybe a Judkins or somebody like that, and they pass on a Marion Hampton here. And I really think that they could go corner here. Barron could be in play. Will Johnson, if he was on the board, could be in play. But I think I'm gonna have them going edge with one of the biggest risers throughout this offseason. And I'm gonna have them going with the edge presence after they lost to Marcus Lawrence and go with Shamar Stewart, a Texas guy from Texas A&M, to pretty much just keep him there. And they really do need somebody opposite Micah Parsons. They need to pay him as well and to kind of help him out. And Shamar Stewart's going to come in and do that. He's able to get after the quarterback on pass rush. He's able to be a great run defender. And he has pretty much all the upside in the world. He's kind of like an athletic freak, similar to a Michael Williams. He has all the tools. He just needs to be able to be developed. And Dallas pretty much has a knack for staying at their spot and taking the best player available that falls into their lap. And that's pretty much just what happens here for the Cowboys getting Shamar Stewart. The Miami Dolphins, they definitely do need offensive line help. Kelvin Banks is still on the board, but I think that they need more interior at guard. And with them, I think Tyler Booker is one of the safest players in this draft. He's one of my favorite offensive linemen that I've broken down on the channel. He's a great run blocker. He gets tons of movement. He plays the angles on the second level, and the Dolphins really do just need to protect Tua and make sure that he stays healthy. And they do that here by taking Tyler Booker. He may not have the highest ceiling, but he's definitely one of the lowest floor or the highest floor guys. And the fact that he's going to be a great offensive lineman and he's going to be a great uh starter in the league. He may not hit that all pro ceiling immediately, but he's going to immediately be able to step in and be able to protect Tua and be a great starter in this league. The Colts, I think that they're going to look at tight end still. They need Anthony Richardson, a safety valve for him. And Loveland, I think, could go a lot higher than what people think right now. He's being mocked more in the 20s. I think he could go a little bit higher here to the Colts based on what a lot of people are thinking. He's more that Brock Bowers type build. He's more that receiving tight end that's going to line up in the slot. And I think they brought in Daniel Jones to compete with Anthony Richardson. Obviously, Anthony Richardson's going to be the starter. And I think that they're going to try to set him up to where he has no excuses and he has all the weapons possible. He has Jonathan Taylor back there at running back. He would have Colson Loveland at tight end, and he would have a great receiving core. And if he ends up failing, then they would move on after this year. But the report is that he's been working out very well and he's been progressing throughout the offseason very well. So I guess we'll see if they add a little bit more weapons for him to be able to develop and be able to show that off. The Atlanta Falcons here, I think that they still need edge. They had a few surprising cuts. They didn't really do much in free agency. They let Drew Dahlman go, so that offensive line's definitely a question. They ended up kind of surprise cutting Grady Jarrett, so they could need an interior defensive lineman. But I think edge is really the issue here, and they need an edge piece. And I think Mike Green would be a great fit. Mike Green's one of my favorite players in this draft. He was one of the most productive college players all last year. He had 17 sacks, tons of tackles for losses, and he was one of the more dominant. Now the excuse is maybe he couldn't do that if he was in the SEC, but he ended up going to the Senior Bowl and he ended up dominating everybody. Now it kind of hurt him a little bit that he couldn't work out at the combine, but at the Senior Bowl he came out and he pretty much dominated everybody and won against in the one-on-ones. And I think this edge piece is definitely gonna be a great player for the Atlanta Falcons to come in and help out and kind of help solidify that defense after they've taken offense the last couple of years in a row. The Arizona Cardinals, there's a couple spots they can go here. A lot of the receivers are still on the board. They could definitely still need corner. They ended up bringing in Josh Sweat, and they have Jonathan Gannon as their head coach, who's the former Eagles defensive coordinator. I think he's going to try to replicate what the Eagles are doing, along with a lot of other teams are going to try to do the same. And they still need help on the interior defense line. I don't think that they did enough, in my opinion, in free agency to be able to pretty much just let it go. And one of the top risers throughout this offseason as well was Walter Nolan at the Senior Bowl. He pretty much dominated everybody. He didn't work out the combine, but in his tape, everybody kind of went back and looked at it and seen how good of a player he was. And I think that they need to help out the interior defense line after not really signing anybody and only bringing in edge pieces and Josh Sweat. And Jonathan Gannon's going to see that and want to help out and build up his defense. I could easily see him taking a receiver here. I think that they still do need another piece across from Marvin Harrison Jr. to help out Kyler Murray. They could be offensive line here as well for the interior if Tyler Booker's on the board. But I think Walter Nolan would be able to go in the interior defensive line and help him out and be a great run stopper for him, along with being a great pass rusher from the interior of the defensive line. The Bengals have definitely been hurting in this offseason. They didn't pay Jamar Chase for a while. They didn't pay T. Higgins. They just did that last night, and now they're the two highest paid receivers in the NFL. And they still trade Henderson, who was one of the most uh, dominant pass rushers last year, who had the most sacks in the NFL. And they're still, whether they're going to trade him or not, they don't want to pay him either. So I think that they're going to be looking for an edge piece to go along with Trey Henderson. I think they're going to figure that one out and re-sign him. So I think that they're going to get a complimentary piece to him. And a guy that's had some character concerns, but I think is going to go very high in this draft is James Pierce. James Pierce, 2 years ago, he was seen as somebody that would be the first overall pick in this draft. And then last year, he didn't have the production that everybody was hoping. And there's a lot of character concerns around him. But he has all the athleticism in the world. That's something that we've seen at the combine. He came in the combine and blew it up with his athleticism. He had a great 40-yard dash. I think the Bengals definitely do need to help out on defense, and they need to get somebody opposite of Trey Henderson on the other side to be able to get after the quarterback. And I think that's what they do here, and they get James Pierce to be a complimentary piece. The Seattle Seahawks, moving on here, I think that they didn't really do too much as I would expect. They run in Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold as well struggled in Minnesota with a bad interior offensive line. I think that's kind of the same thing here. The Seattle Seahawks didn't really address offensive line. Some people thought that they might go out and sign Josh Myers, but with them not addressing it and not signing anybody for the interior offensive line, I think that just kind of goes with what they're going to end up doing here that I think, and they're going to go with Gray Zabel. Some of the offensive linemen have started to fall in this mock draft on this board, and with them taking Gray Zabel, he could play any of the five positions. He could play center, he could play guard, he could play tackle. I think that they would definitely draft him here to go in and play center, but at the worst, he could still play guard as well. And I think that they really just need to help out Sam Darnold to be able to protect him. They gave him a big deal that was 3 years and worth $33 million a year. So you're pretty much investing in him. You got a little bit younger position, and he's going to be your franchise guy for the next 3 years. And you need to be able to protect him and make him feel safe, unlike what they were able to do in Minnesota last year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they've been struggling at the linebacker position. They were able to bring back Chris Godwin, so I think receivers kind of out of the question here. And they ended up bringing in Hassan Reddick on a 1 year kind of prove it deal. That's a high reward, low risk type thing. So I think that they still need a linebacker. And Jahad Campbell, he's also an athletic freak guy that a lot of teams are going to see, and he could easily. Some people have talked about him moving down to the edge position, but I think he stays more at linebacker. And the Buccaneers have been looking for a Devin White replacement ever since he kind of fell off and he was nowhere near as good. So I think that he could step in here and be that replacement and go alongside with Levante David and kind of learn from Levante David for a year or two before he ends up taking over at that position. Denver Broncos, they brought in Evan Ingram. I really liked their offseason. They definitely upgraded that defense that played very well last year. They ended up bringing in a couple pieces like Fuaga and Dre Greenlaw, and I think that they're in a really good spot. I think their draft pick is pretty much going to be setting up Bo Nix and helping him succeed. And Sean Payton's gonna want to take whatever guy that he thinks is gonna be impactful in his offense and can play multiple positions. It could end up being wide receiver here, But I think it's going to be more running back. They let Javonte Williams walk. They didn't really bring in any running back. And I think with Amarion Hampton still on the board, this would be a great fit. If Genty somehow made it here, I could easily see the Broncos trying to move up to get Genty. But I think that they'd be perfectly happy with Amarion Hampton. I think that gap is very similar compared to Genty and Hampton. I think a lot of teams are going to see them very similarly. So I think with him falling here, this would be one of the first spots that the Denver Broncos would be able to jump on him and take him. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they ended up bringing in DK Metcalf, so they still have George Pickens and DK. I think that they're pretty set up there. They're trying to bring in Aaron Rodgers, but he's trying to decide on whether he's going to go to Minnesota. Some people are talking about that this could be a spot for Jackson Dart in the late first round. I do think a team is going to trade up and take Jackson Dart in the late half of the first, but I'm not going to do trades. I think that this is a little bit rich for me for Jackson Dart. I could easily see him trading down a little bit and then taking him, but they still need help at corner, and I'm gonna end up having them taking Jahdae Barron, who is a great man corner. He has incredible speed. He has great recovery speed, and I think him. The Steelers just need help in that secondary after bringing in DK. A lot of people had them mocking taking a receiver. I think that's kind of off the board, and they're going to help out in that secondary spot with one of their weaknesses and the secondary, whether it's safety or corner here. The Los Angeles Chargers, they still need weapons on that offense. They ended up bringing in Mekhi Becton to be able to be that Jim Harbaugh type offense. I could see them taking running back here, but Amarion Hampton's already off the board. Genty's off the board. They could end up taking Trayvon Henderson, but with Tedero McMillan on the board, I'm gonna have them taking him. They have Vlad McConkey and Quentin Johnson. Those are all different type of receivers along with Tedero McMillan. So I think with him coming in, he would be that big body guy for Justin Herbert that could be a deep ball threat, and he could also play in several different spots and be able to kind of move around and go in and into the slot. So I think that Jim Harbaugh will see that and see the value in that. And not only with the run game, being able to have a dominant receiver with that big body frame that he has on the outside. Number 23, the Green Bay Packers here. There's a couple spots I think they're definitely an interesting team. They brought in a guard to be able to sign in free agency. They ended up losing their center. I think that they would really value Gray Zabel here, but he's off the board. And I thought about a tackle here as well, but I think that they would bring in Jordan Morgan from Arizona last year to be able to play that tackle spot. So I ended up having a edge player that fell a little bit here that not a lot of people have been talking about recently. And Jalen Walker, he's a little bit undersized. He played linebacker at Georgia, but I think whatever team drafts him here in the first round, he is going to be an edge player. And Rashawn Gary kind of took a step back for the Packers, and with the Packers here, both the corners that you would want here in the first round is off the board. So I think to help out with Rashawn Gary and kind of get a little bit of a edge rotation going, they would take Jalen Walker here, who's going to be more that speed rusher guy. That's a little bit of a different pace between the rushers that they have now. The Minnesota Vikings, they brought in a ton of guys. They won free agency. They were one of the teams that was top three winners to me. They brought in a lot of offensive line help, a lot of interior defense line help, and those were the two places that I think that they needed the most. They ended up bringing in Jonathan Allen. They brought in Javon Hargraves, who ended up getting cut from the 49ers. They brought in Will Fries, Ron Kelly to help out the offensive defensive line. So I think that really just points them more into the secondary. And I think this sets them up to be able to take a guy that blew up the combine. He had probably the best combine of all time, and Nick Emmanwori from South Carolina. I think that brings him in to take and go in the first round, and I think that brings him in to the number one safety off the board. If you look at the numbers, he had one of the best combines ever. So I think that makes him rise on a couple teams, and the way the Vikings end up signing, I think this sets them up to be able to draft somebody in the secondary to be able to take over for Harrison Smith once he's done in about a year or two. The Houston Texans, they ended up trading Laremy Tunsil, which was a crazy, surprising trade. In my opinion, I think that they should have got more back from the Commanders for Laremy Tunsil. They ended up trading Kenyon Green as well, their other offensive line, so they're pretty much resetting their offensive line. And in this mock, it actually worked out very well for them because they have Kelvin Banks here still on the board, who ended up falling quite a bit. Kelvin Banks is probably one of my favorite offensive linemen in this class. He's a true left tackle. Some people think he could play guard as well, but he is a mauler in the run game and he has great pass blocking technique. He's able to stay in front of his guys, uses great hand techniques, and I think Kelvin Banks really would be able to step in and protect CJ Stroud and start to get them back to where they were before they ended up trading Laramie Tunsil. I think that kind of keys them in on taking a left tackle here. The Rams are bringing back Matthew Stafford as well. I think a tight end could be in play here, but both of them are off the board. So I think that they really need to protect Matthew Stafford in his old age. And Josh Simmons, Note Bloom was a free agent. He hasn't signed back with the Rams yet. So I think Josh Simmons would be a great fit in here. Josh Simmons was a guy that could have been the first tackle off the board, but he ended up getting hurt 6 games into the season, and he has great technique. He has all the things you would want in a left tackle. It's just that he has an injury history, so I think that's going to force him to slide a little bit. And the Rams need to be able to protect Matthew Stafford. The Baltimore Ravens, I think Malachi Starks is still on the board here, and I think that they're going to compare him and pair him up with Kyle Hamilton. They could have took one of the receivers that are still on the board. The receivers are kind of sliding here in this mock draft, but I think that they see an opportunity to be able to build a very good defense for them and to be able to compete with the Chiefs and try to knock off the Chiefs. I think comparing and pairing up Malachi Starks and Kyle Hamilton would do that and make their defense even that much better. They could have went edge here, but a lot of the edges are off the board. And they could have went interior defense line, but I think that they're going to value Malachi Starks and kind of do it the same way that they did when they took Kyle Hamilton. Number 28, the Lions. They still do need a guard here. I think that they're going to wait on that. Kevin Zeiler ended up leaving in free agency. They could end up going with an edge piece here to be able to go opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, but I think Kenneth Grant at this point in the draft, with him still on the board, they need to be able to upgrade that interior defense line. They were able to bring back a couple of the pieces on that defense line. So I think that they're going to look to upgrade it and get the run defense even that much better and be a defensive focused team like they were, and hopefully get more of a rotation to be able to deal with the injuries that they had last year. And I think Kenneth Grant is going to bring that toughness that Dan Campbell wants and to be able to help out with their run defense. The Buffalo Bills, there's a couple spots here they definitely do need corner, but a lot of the two corners are off the board. I don't necessarily see. Oh well, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Commanders here on the board, and I think that they're going to look at receiver. They brought in Laramie Tunsil to be able to play. They also brought in Deebo Samuel, but I still don't think that them bringing in Samuel ends up taking away from them looking at wide receiver. With a lot of the defensive players off the board, I think that they're going to look at with Matthew Golden, who's still here on the board, to be able to help out Jaden Daniels and be the long-term answer for him. And if you look at Matthew Golden, he was definitely a big play guy. Anytime Texas needed a big play, he was always the one that committed on that big play. He came out and he ran that blazing fast 40. In this mock, in this situation, he kind of fell down the board a little bit. I do think he could end up going higher in the first round, but based off needs after free agency, this is kind of where I have him here at the Commanders. And I think he'd be a great fit with Jaden Daniels to just kind of help him out and get and be a kind of that slot piece that they ended up losing to the Bears, and Big Z ended up leaving in free agency. So I think he can kind of step in and be that spot for the Commanders offense. The Buffalo Bills, I think that they definitely could go linebacker or secondary. Obviously, there's not much on the board. These have already been taken, so I'm going to have them going with wide receiver again. I think that they still need a couple weapons. I could easily see him taking safety, corner, one of those areas, but with Luther Burton still on the board, I think that'd be a great fit for Josh Allen. He's pretty much a yak god. He has all the abilities to be able to make the run after the catch that the Buffalo Bills desperately need. They have more of the deep threat type guys. I think he could be that underneath option for Josh Allen to be able to take and get more yards after catch and be able to make a couple big plays that the Buffalo Bills need in their explosiveness. Kansas City Chiefs, they're still looking to upgrade the offensive line. They end up trading Joe Thuney. That just means that they're going to keep Trey Smith. They still have Jawan Taylor. I think that they're going to be looking for a left tackle, even though they ended up signing one in free agency. I think Josh Connerly could step in there and do that. They're at 31. They're pretty much looking for offensive line depth. They were dominated up front last year in the Super Bowl from the Eagles, and I think that Josh Connerly could have come in and be able to protect Josh Allen for those guys that they don't have on that offensive line. Then lastly, I ended up debating on this one. I thought about interior defense line, but they don't necessarily need that. They ended up losing a lot in free agency. It could be a guard after they don't have Mekhi Becton, but not really one on the board. They have one of the best young secondaries. So I have them going with another edge piece and going with Donovan Ezeuruke from Boston College. I know I butchered that. I can never say his name right. And he's a great edge piece for the Philadelphia Eagles to be able to pick up and be able to be a complementary to be able to take over after what Josh Sweat was able to do and kind of be that Josh Sweat replacement for the Eagles. So this is kind of my mock draft and a recap of it here of where I was. There's still a lot of good pieces on the board. Emeka Egbuka wasn't taken here. He would fall into the second round. A lot of the running backs, Jared Wilson still on the board, Donovan Jackson still on the board. They would fall into the second round. So there's definitely some other pieces, but over the next month, a lot of this is still going to change. There's going to be new reports and new rumors going around of what teams are targeting which players. So please make sure to like the video, comment down below anything you agreed or disagree with that I talked about in here, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for future NFL content that I'm going to be putting out. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, feel like John Morant. Need a triple double. Told him check the stats. Yeah, I got a couple. I don't drop the ball. Now I never fumble. I'm the MVP. Now I feel like Russell. Feel like John Morant. Need a triple double. Told him check the stats. Yeah, I got a couple. I don't drop